The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight as Rosalind Sterling stood frozen before the full-length mirror in her new bedchamber. The white lace nightgown her lady's maid had dressed her in felt like gossamer against her skin, too thin, too revealing, too terrifying. Her auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders in waves she had never worn loose before, and her green eyes stared back at her with barely concealed panic. Please subscribe for more heartfelt love stories. Tonight, she would become a wife in every sense of the word. Tonight a man would touch her in ways she had only heard whispered about in scandalized tones. Tonight everything would change. Rosalind wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the familiar ridges beneath the silk fabric, the scars, her shameful secrets, hidden for years beneath high collars and long sleeves, marks left by her stepfather's belt when she had displeased him, which seemed to happen almost daily during her childhood. Her mother had died when Rosalind was only 8, and her father had remarried quickly to a widow with a cruel streak. When her father passed 2 years later, her stepfather had shown his true nature. The beatings had been called discipline, correction for a willful girl who read too many books, who questioned too much, who did not lower her eyes quickly enough. By the time Rosalind turned 16, her back and shoulders were covered in thin white lines that told a story of survival she had never shared with anyone. And now she was married to Julian Ashford, a man she had met only 4 times before their wedding day. Their families had arranged the match. Her stepfather needed the respectability and business connections, while Julian's family wanted him settled with a proper wife. Neither Rosalind nor Julian had been given much choice in the matter. She heard footsteps in the corridor outside, and her heart began to race. The door opened slowly, and Julian entered, still wearing his wedding waistcoat, though he had removed his jacket and cravat. He was handsome in an unconventional way, with wheat-colored hair that fell across his forehead and striking blue-grey eyes that seemed to see more than most people. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with quiet confidence as he closed the door behind him. The silence stretched between them, unbridgeable chasm. Rosalind could not meet his eyes, could not bear to see whatever expression might be there. Desire, disappointment, impatience. Rosalind, Julian said softly, and something in his tone made her look up. He stood several feet away, making no move to approach her. You look absolutely terrified. Are you frightened of me? The directness of the question caught her off guard. She had expected many things, but not honest inquiry. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I have never. I do not know what to expect. Julian moved slowly to a chair by the fireplace and sat down, putting even more distance between them. Would it help if I told you what I expect? Rosalind nodded, unable to form words. I expect nothing from you tonight, Julian said, his voice gentle but firm. Or any other night until you are ready. I know this marriage was not your choice any more than it was mine. I know we are strangers brought together by family obligation, and I know that forcing intimacy between strangers is not the way to build anything lasting. Rosalind stared at him in disbelief. But you are my husband. You have rights. I have no rights over your body that you do not freely give me, Julian said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Listen to me carefully, Rosalind. I will never take anything from you by force. I will never demand what you are not willing to offer. And I certainly will not touch you when you are looking at me like I am or a wolf about to devour you. Something inside Rosalind's chest loosened slightly, a tension she had been carrying all day beginning to ease. I do not understand. Every woman I spoke to said that wedding nights are difficult, that a wife must simply endure her duty. Julian's jaw tightened. Then every woman you spoke to has had the misfortune of marrying men who do not deserve them. Rosalind, intimacy between a husband and wife should bring pleasure to both parties. It should never be about endurance or duty alone. Pleasure. The concept seemed foreign to her. She had been taught that physical pleasure was sinful, that a proper woman submitted without complaint, but certainly without enjoyment. Yes, pleasure, Julian confirmed. He stood and walked to a side table where a decanter of brandy sat with 2 glasses. He poured a small amount into each glass and brought one to her. "Here, this might help calm your nerves." Rosalind accepted the glass with trembling hands and took a small sip. The liquid burned pleasantly down her throat, spreading warmth through her chest. Julian returned to his chair and sipped his own drink, watching her with those perceptive eyes. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "What do you enjoy doing? What makes you happy?" The question was so unexpected that Rosalind almost laughed. "You want to talk? I want to know my wife," Julian replied. "Is that so strange? I thought tonight would be about other things." "Tonight is about us beginning to build trust," Julian said. "Everything else can wait until you feel safe with me. So please, talk to me. Help me understand who you are." Rosalind found herself slowly lowering onto the edge of the bed, still clutching her brandy glass. "I enjoy reading," she said hesitantly. "Poetry mostly, and novels when I can get them. My stepfather thinks such things are frivolous, but I have always found comfort in stories." "What is your favorite book?" Julian asked, and for the next hour they talked. Rosalind spoke about literature, about her love of gardens, about her dream of one day traveling beyond the small town where she had grown up. Julian shared his own passions for architecture and his work managing his family's shipping business. He made her laugh with stories of disastrous business meetings and charmed her with his unexpected knowledge of romantic poetry. As the clock struck 1 in the morning, Rosalind realized she had forgotten to be afraid. Julian had kept his distance the entire time, never once making her feel pressured or uncomfortable. When he finally stood, she felt a strange disappointment that their conversation was ending. "I should let you rest," Julian said. "Thank you for talking with me tonight." "Wait," Rosalind said before she could stop herself. "Where will you sleep?" Julian gestured to a door she had not noticed earlier. "There is an adjoining room. I will be right next door if you need anything. You are not staying here." The words came out before she could think better of them. Julian turned back to her, his expression gentle. "Not unless you want me to. And even then, only to sleep. Nothing more unless and until you ask for it." Rosalind stood, setting her empty glass aside. Her heart was pounding again, but this time it was not entirely from fear. This man, her husband, had treated her with more kindness and respect in one evening than her stepfather had shown in years. "Stay," she whispered. "Please. I do not want to be alone." Julian's eyes searched her face. "Are you certain?" Yes. She was not certain what she was agreeing to, but she knew she did not want him to leave. Julian nodded and removed his waistcoat, draping it over the chair. He kept his shirt and trousers on as he approached the bed. Rosalind climbed under the covers, her heart racing as Julian slid in beside her, maintaining a respectful distance between them. "May I hold your hand?" he asked softly. Rosalind extended her hand across the small space between them, and Julian's fingers closed around hers. His hand was warm and strong, his touch gentle. They lay there in the candlelight, hands clasped, and Rosalind felt tears slip down her cheeks. "What is wrong?" Julian asked with concern. "Nothing is wrong," Rosalind said, her voice thick with emotion. I expected tonight to be terrible. I expected to feel used and afraid. But you have been kind." Julian squeezed her hand. "You deserve kindness, Rosalind. You deserve to be treated with respect and care. I hope that in time you will come to trust me enough to tell me why you expected anything less." Rosalind closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her secrets pressing against her chest. Perhaps someday she would find the courage to show him her scars, to tell him about the pain that had shaped her. But for tonight, this was enough. This gentle hand holding hers in the darkness, this man who asked for nothing but offered everything. "Julian," she whispered. "Yes. Would you? Could you kiss me? Just once. I would like to know what it feels like when it is my choice." She felt Julian shift closer in the darkness. His free hand came up to cup her cheek with infinite gentleness. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Yes." Julian leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When his lips finally touched hers, it was soft and sweet, a question rather than a demand. Rosalind's breath caught at the sensation, at the tenderness of it. His mouth moved against hers carefully, exploring, and when he pulled back after only a few seconds, she found herself leaning toward him, wanting more. "That was your first kiss," Julian said. And it was not a question. "Yes," Rosalind admitted, her cheeks burning. "Was it acceptable?" Julian's thumb stroked her cheek. "It was perfect. You are perfect." They settled back into their positions, hands still clasped, and Rosalind felt something she had not experienced in years. Safety, hope, the possibility that her life might hold more than fear and pain. As sleep began to claim her, she heard Julian whisper, "Sleep well, Rosalind. I will be right here." And for the first time since her mother died, Rosalind fell asleep feeling protected. Morning sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains, casting golden stripes across the bed where Rosalind slowly opened her eyes. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back. She turned her head and found Julian already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her with a soft expression. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Did you sleep well?" Rosalind nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were lying. At some point during the night, they had moved toward each other, and now only inches separated them. "I did. Better than I have in years, actually. I am glad." Julian reached out and tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I have been lying here thinking about how beautiful you are." Heat flooded Rosalind's face. "You do not have to say such things." "I am not saying them because I have to," Julian replied. "I am saying them because they are true." His thumb traced along her jawline, and Rosalind felt her breath quicken. "May I kiss you again?" The memory of their kiss last night sent a flutter through her stomach. "Yes," she whispered, this time when Julian's lips met hers. The kiss was deeper, more confident. His mouth moved against hers with gentle insistence, and when his tongue traced the seam of her lips, Rosalind gasped in surprise. Julian took the opportunity to deepen the kiss further, his tongue sliding against hers in a way that made her entire body flush with unfamiliar heat. Rosalind found herself responding instinctively, her hands coming up to clutch his shoulders. The kiss went on and on, growing more passionate, until both of them were breathing hard. Julian pulled back slightly, his eyes dark with something that made Rosalind's pulse race. "I want to touch you," he said, his voice rough. "I want to learn every inch of you, but only if you want that too." Rosalind's mind warred with itself. Her body was responding to Julian in ways she had never experienced, craving more of his touch, more of the sensations he was creating. But fear still lurked beneath the desire. What would he think when he saw her scars? Would his kindness evaporate when he discovered how damaged she truly was? "I want that," she said, making a decision. "But there is something you should know first, something I need to show you." Julian's expression grew serious. "You can tell me anything, Rosalind, or show me anything. Nothing will change how I see you. You say that now," Rosalind said, sitting up and turning away from him. Her hands shook as she reached for the ribbon at the back of her nightgown. "But you have not seen what I have been hiding, Rosalind. Wait." Julian sat up beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You do not have to do this if you are not ready. If we are to have any kind of real marriage, you need to know the truth about me." Rosalind took a deep breath and slowly pulled the nightgown off her shoulders, letting it pull at her waist. She sat with her back to Julian, her scarred skin exposed to the morning light. The silence that followed felt eternal. Rosalind squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for disgust, for rejection, for Julian to call for an annulment based on her damaged state. Instead, she felt his fingers trace one of the scars with heartbreaking gentleness. "Who did this to you?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but there was steel beneath the softness. "My stepfather," Rosalind said, her voice breaking, "starting when I was 8 years old and continuing until I turned 18. He called it correction, punishment for my willful nature, my sharp tongue, my improper thoughts. I learned to hide them, to cover them always, to never let anyone see what a failure I was." "Stop," Julian's arms came around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. You are not a failure. You are a survivor. These scars do not make you damaged or broken. They make you strong because you endured something terrible, and you are still here, still standing, still fighting. Rosalind felt tears streaming down her face. How can you say that? I am marked, ruined. Julian turned her in his arms, forcing her to face him. His eyes blazed with intensity. You are marked, yes, but not ruined. These scars tell a story of survival. They tell me that you are far braver and stronger than I could have imagined. And the man who did this to you is a monster who deserves to suffer for what he inflicted on a child. He is still my stepfather. He still has power over me. No, Julian said firmly. He has no power over you anymore. You are my wife now, and I will protect you with everything I have. He will never touch you again. I swear it on my life. Rosalind searched his face, looking for any sign of deception or pity, but all she saw was fierce protectiveness and genuine care. You truly do not find me repulsive. In answer, Julian kissed her again, deeply and passionately. His hands moved over her back, tracing the scars with reverent touches that made Rosalind shiver. I find you absolutely captivating, he murmured against her lips. Every part of you, including these marks that prove your strength. He laid her back on the bed, his hands continuing their exploration of her scarred skin. What Rosalind had expected to be a moment of shame transformed into something else entirely. Julian kissed along her shoulders, pressing his lips to each scar he could reach, as if trying to heal old wounds with tenderness. You are so beautiful, he whispered between kisses. So incredibly beautiful. Rosalind felt the last of her resistance crumbling. The desire that had been building since their first kiss intensified into a need she could not ignore. Julian, she breathed. I need ... Tell me what you need, he urged, his hands moving to cup her face. I need you to make me forget, Rosalind said desperately. To replace those painful memories with something good. I need to feel something other than shame when I think about my body. Julian's expression softened even as his eyes darkened with desire. Are you certain? We can wait as long as you need. I am certain. I want this. I want you. What followed was a revelation. Julian undressed slowly, showing Rosalind his own body without shame or hesitation. When he removed her nightgown completely, he took his time exploring every inch of her with his hands and mouth, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch toward him, what made her cry out in pleasure. He was patient and gentle, talking to her throughout, asking what felt good, making sure she was comfortable. When he finally positioned himself between her thighs, he moved slowly, giving her body time to adjust to the unfamiliar sensation. There was discomfort at first, a stretching that made Rosalind tense, but Julian held still, kissing her, whispering reassurances until her body relaxed and accepted him. Then he began to move, and the discomfort gave way to pleasure that built with each careful thrust. Look at me, Julian commanded softly, and Rosalind opened her eyes to find him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. I want you to see who is loving you. I want you to remember this. Remember that you are cherished and desired exactly as you are. Rosalind felt tears slip down her temples, but they were not tears of pain. They were tears of release, of healing, of discovering that her body could be a source of pleasure instead of shame. Julian moved within her with increasing urgency, his control slipping as his own pleasure built. Rosalind, he groaned. You feel perfect, so perfect. She felt something building inside her, a tension coiling tighter and tighter. Julian's hand moved between their bodies, finding a spot that made her cry out sharply. He circled it with his fingers, while continuing to move inside her, and suddenly Rosalind shattered. Pleasure crashed through her in waves so intense, she could not breathe, could not think, could only feel. Julian followed her moments later, groaning her name as he found his own release. They collapsed together, tangled in sheets, and each other, both breathing hard. Julian rolled to the side, but kept Rosalind pulled close against him, his arms wrapped protectively around her. Are you all right? He asked, concern in his voice. Rosalind nodded against his chest. I am more than all right. I am. I did not know it could be like that. Neither did I, Julian admitted. I have been with women before, but it was never like this. Never so intense, so meaningful. They lay together in comfortable silence for a while, both processing what had just happened. Finally, Rosalind spoke. My stepfather's name is Gordon Whitmore. He's a merchant with significant influence in town. People respect him, admire him even. They have no idea what he is truly like behind closed doors. Tell me everything, Julian said. I want to know all of it. And Rosalind did. For the first time in her life, she told someone the complete truth. She described the beatings, the cruel words, the way her stepfather had systematically destroyed her confidence and sense of self-worth. She talked about her mother's death, her father's quick remarriage, and the years of abuse that followed. Julian listened without interrupting, his arms tightening around her as the story unfolded. When she finally finished, his jaw was clenched with barely controlled rage. He will answer for what he has done, Julian said quietly. I promise you that. He's too powerful, Rosalind protested. No one would believe me over him. Then I will make them believe. Julian kissed her forehead. You are not alone anymore, Rosalind. You have me now, and I have resources and connections of my own. Gordon Whitmore is going to learn that he chose the wrong man's wife to torment. Rosalind felt hope stirring in her chest for the first time in years. Perhaps Julian was right. Perhaps her stepfather's reign of terror truly was over. She snuggled closer to her husband, feeling safe and protected in his arms. They spent the rest of the morning in bed, sometimes talking, sometimes making love again with increasing confidence and passion. Julian proved to be an attentive and generous lover, focused entirely on Rosalind's pleasure. By afternoon, she was thoroughly satisfied and completely in love with the man she had married. I have to tell you something, Rosalind said as they finally rose and dressed for the day. I think I am falling in love with you, Julian smiled. That warm expression that made her heart flutter. Good, because I am absolutely certain I am falling in love with you too. He pulled her close and kissed her deeply. We have been given an unexpected gift, Rosalind, a marriage arranged by others that has become something real and true. I intend to cherish that gift every single day. As they descended the stairs together to face their first full day as husband and wife, Rosalind felt transformed. The frightened, damaged girl who had stood in that bedchamber last night was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own worth, who had experienced genuine pleasure and love, and who was ready to build a new life free from the shadows of her past. 3 weeks had passed since Rosalind and Julian's wedding, 3 weeks of discovering passion and building genuine affection. Rosalind had blossomed under Julian's care, her confidence growing with each day. She laughed more freely, spoke her mind without fear, and had begun to believe that happiness might actually be possible for her. They were having breakfast in the sunlit dining room when the butler entered with a silver tray. A letter has arrived for Mrs. Ashford, he announced, presenting the envelope to Rosalind. She recognized the handwriting immediately and felt her appetite vanish. The letter was from her stepfather. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and read the brief message inside. What is it? Julian asked, noticing how the color had drained from her face. He's coming here, Rosalind whispered, tomorrow afternoon. He says he wishes to see how I am settling into married life and to discuss business matters with you. Julian set down his teacup with deliberate care. Then we will receive him, and we will make certain things very clear about your new circumstances. You do not understand, Rosalind said, panic rising in her chest. He will expect me to behave a certain way, to show him the deference he believes he is owed. If I do not, if he thinks I have been speaking against him, Julian moved his chair closer and took both her hands in his. Listen to me, Rosalind. He cannot hurt you anymore. I will not allow it. You are under my protection now, and I promise you that Gordon Whitmore will leave this house understanding exactly that. Despite Julian's reassurances, Rosalind barely slept that night. Old fears had resurfaced with brutal force. She kept waking from nightmares of her stepfather's belt, of his cold voice telling her she was worthless, of the pain that had defined so much of her childhood. Julian held her through each nightmare, whispering comfort until she fell back asleep. By morning, she was exhausted but determined. She would not cower before her stepfather. She had Julian beside her now, and she would draw strength from that. Gordon Whitmore arrived precisely at 2 o'clock in an expensive carriage that announced his wealth and status. Rosalind stood beside Julian in the entrance hall, her hand gripped tightly in his. She had dressed carefully in a high-necked emerald gown that covered her scars completely, her hair arranged in an elegant style that spoke of her new position as a merchant's wife. When Gordon entered, he looked exactly as Rosalind remembered. Tall and imposing, with iron grey hair and cold blue eyes that swept over everything with calculating assessment. His gaze landed on Rosalind, and she felt herself instinctively straightening her posture, preparing for criticism. "Stepdaughter," Gordon said, his voice formal, "you look well. Marriage appears to agree with you." "Thank you," Rosalind managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Gordon's attention shifted to Julian. "Mr. Ashford, I appreciate you receiving me on such short notice. There are several business propositions I wish to discuss, of course," Julian said smoothly. "But first, perhaps we might have tea in the drawing room. I am sure you wish to visit with Rosalind." They settled into the elegant drawing room, where tea had been prepared. Gordon took the finest chair, sitting with the posture of a man accustomed to commanding spaces. Rosalind poured tea with hands that only shook slightly, grateful when Julian positioned himself beside her on the settee. "I trust you are fulfilling your wifely duties appropriately," Gordon said to Rosalind, his tone casual but with an edge that made her stomach clench. "I would hate to hear that you have brought shame to your new household with any of your willful behavior." Before Rosalind could respond, Julian spoke. "My wife is exemplary in every regard. I could not ask for a better partner." Something flickered in Gordon's eyes, surprise, perhaps, that Julian had answered instead of allowing Rosalind to respond. "I am pleased to hear it." Rosalind required significant correction during her youth. A stubborn, disobedient child who needed firm guidance to learn proper behavior. Rosalind felt Julian tense beside her, but his voice remained calm. "I find my wife to be thoughtful, intelligent, and perfectly capable of making her own decisions. I cannot imagine what would require correction." Gordon's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "You are newly married, Mr. Ashford. You do not yet know her as I do. Rosalind has always had a tendency toward improper thoughts and actions. It was my duty to teach her discipline." "Your duty," Julian repeated, his tone still pleasant, but with steel beneath the surface. "Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, what methods did you employ in this teaching?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Gordon's eyes narrowed. "The methods any responsible guardian would use. Discipline appropriate to correct bad behavior. Bad behavior such as," Julian pressed, "speaking out of turn, questioning authority, reading unsuitable material, general willfulness." Gordon waved his hand dismissively. "Nothing that concerns you now, of course. I simply mention it, so you are aware of her nature should problems arise." Rosalind felt something inside her snap. Years of silence, years of swallowing her truth, suddenly felt unbearable. "You beat me," she said quietly. The room went absolutely still. Gordon's face turned to stone. "I beg your pardon." "You beat me," Rosalind repeated, louder now. "With your belt, with your hands, with whatever was convenient. You left scars across my back and shoulders. You called it correction, but it was cruelty. It was abuse." Gordon stood abruptly, his face flushing with anger. "How dare you speak such lies? I provided for you after your father died. I gave you a home, food, education. And this is how you repay me, with slander and ingratitude." "They are not lies," Rosalind said, rising to her feet as well. Julian stood with her, his presence solid and supportive at her side. Every word is true, and you know it. You brutalized a child 4 years and called it discipline. Mind your tongue, girl, Gordon snarled, taking a step toward her. You forget yourself. No, Rosalind said. Feeling power surge through her. I have finally remembered myself, remembered that I am not the worthless, broken creature you tried to make me believe I was. I am strong. I survived you. And I will not be silent anymore. Gordon's hand rose, an automatic gesture that spoke of years of intimidation. But before he could complete the movement, Julian stepped between them, his own hand catching Gordon's wrist in an iron grip. Do not even think about it, Julian said, his voice cold and dangerous. You will never raise your hand to my wife again. You will never threaten her, frighten her, or come anywhere near her unless she explicitly invites you to do so. Gordon tried to pull his arm free, but Julian held firm. Release me at once. I am her stepfather. I have rights. You have no rights here, Julian said. You forfeited any claim to familial respect when you abused a child in your care. Rosalind is my wife now, under my protection, and I will defend her against anyone who tries to harm her, including you. You cannot prove any of these ridiculous accusations, Gordon blustered, finally wrenching his arm free. Actually, I can, Julian said calmly. Rosalind has shown me the scars you left on her body, physical evidence of years of abuse. I have documented them with my own physician, who will testify to their existence and probable cause if needed. The color drained from Gordon's face. You would not dare make such matters public. The scandal would affect Rosalind as much as me. Try me, Julian replied. I care nothing for scandal compared to my wife's well-being. If you ever threaten her again, if you ever attempt to exert control over her life, I will ensure that every person in society knows exactly what kind of man you are. Your business associates, your social connections, everyone will learn that Gordon Whitmore beats helpless children. Gordon looked between Julian and Rosalind, clearly searching for weakness, for any opening to reassert his dominance. But Rosalind stood tall beside her husband, her chin raised, her eyes meeting his without flinching. You have turned her against me, Gordon said finally, his voice bitter. Poisoned her with lies about the past. I have told Julian nothing but the truth, Rosalind said. And for the first time in my life, someone believed me. Someone saw my pain and validated it instead of dismissing it or blaming me for it. After everything I did for you, Gordon said, shaking his head. This is the gratitude I receive. You want gratitude. Rosalind felt anger burning through her fear. For what? For leaving scars on my body that I will carry for the rest of my life. For making me terrified of my own shadow. For convincing me I was worthless and broken. You deserve no gratitude, only consequences for your cruelty. Gordon's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful, wicked girl. I should have been harsher with you. Perhaps then you would have learned proper respect. Get out, Julian said, his voice cutting through the room like a whip. Get out of my house right now, before I forget I am a gentleman, and throw you out bodily. Our business arrangement, Gordon started, is cancelled, Julian finished. I want nothing to do with you professionally or personally. Any financial matters between us will be handled through solicitors. You are not welcome in this house, or anywhere near my wife. Gordon grabbed his hat and coat, his movements jerky with suppressed fury. At the door, he turned back one final time. You will regret this, he said, directing his words at Rosalind. Both of you will regret humiliating me this way. The only regret I have, Rosalind said clearly, is that I did not find the courage to speak against you years ago. But I have that courage now, thanks to my husband. So take your threats and leave. You have no power over me anymore. Gordon slammed the door on his way out, the sound echoing through the house. As soon as he was gone, Rosalind's legs gave out. Julian caught her, lowering them both onto the settee, holding her as she shook with reaction. You were magnificent, Julian murmured into her hair. So brave and strong. I have never been prouder of anyone in my life. I was terrified, Rosalind admitted, her voice muffled against his chest. I thought I might faint or be sick, but you did not. You stood up to him. You told the truth and refused to be silenced. That is true courage, Rosalind. Being afraid, but doing what is right anyway. They sat together for a long time, Rosalind gradually calming as Julian held her. Finally, she pulled back to look at her husband. He will try to retaliate somehow. He will not simply accept this. Let him try, Julian said grimly. I have already taken precautions. My solicitor has documentation of your injuries. I have made certain inquiries about your stepfather's business practices and discovered some irregularities that could prove quite damaging if brought to light. If he attempts to harm us in any way, I am prepared to destroy his reputation completely. Rosalind stared at him in wonder. You did all that? When? I began the day after you told me about the abuse, Julian said. I wanted to be prepared to protect you from any retaliation. Gordon Whitmore is not the only one with power and connections. Rosalind threw her arms around Julian's neck and kissed him fiercely. I love you, she said, when they finally broke apart. I love you so much it frightens me sometimes. I love you too, Julian replied, cradling her face in his hands. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you feel safe and valued and cherished. They made love that afternoon with desperate intensity, reaffirming their connection, celebrating Rosalind's liberation from her stepfather's control. Julian was passionate but tender, bringing Rosalind to pleasure multiple times before finding his own release. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in their bed, Rosalind felt lighter than she had in years. The confrontation with Gordon had been terrifying, but it had also been freeing. She had faced her abuser and survived. She had spoken her truth and been believed. And she had a partner who would stand beside her against any threat. What happens now? She asked Julian. Now we build our life together, Julian said simply. We fill this house with love and laughter. We create new memories that overshadow the painful ones. We prove that you are so much more than what was done to you. Rosalind smiled and kissed him softly. That sounds perfect. 6 months had passed since the confrontation with Gordon Whitmore, and Rosalind's life had transformed beyond recognition. True to his threats, Gordon had attempted to spread rumors about Julian's business practices and Rosalind's supposed instability. But Julian had been prepared. The evidence of Gordon's own questionable dealings, combined with quiet testimonies from others who had suffered under his cruelty, had silenced him quickly. Gordon had retreated from society, his reputation tarnished, his influence diminished. Rosalind barely thought of him anymore. She was too busy living a life she had never imagined possible. Julian had encouraged her to pursue her interests, and she had begun working with a charitable organization that helped young women escape abusive households. Using her own experience, she provided support and advocacy for those who had nowhere else to turn. The work was fulfilling in ways she had not anticipated, giving purpose to her pain. Her relationship with Julian had deepened into something profound and unshakable. They were partners in every sense, sharing their days and their dreams. The passion between them had not diminished with time, but had instead grown richer, more nuanced. They had explored every aspect of physical intimacy, learning each other's bodies with the dedication of devoted students. It was a crisp autumn evening when Rosalind realized she needed to tell Julian her news. They were in his study, Julian reviewing shipping manifests, while Rosalind sat curled in the leather chair by the fireplace, supposedly reading but actually watching her husband work. She loved these quiet moments, the domestic intimacy of simply being together. Julian, she said softly, setting her book aside. He looked up immediately, always attentive to her. Yes, my love, I have something to tell you, something important. Julian set down his pen and gave her his full attention. You look nervous. Is something wrong? No, nothing is wrong. Rosalind stood and moved to his desk, perching on the edge. At least, I hope you will not think so. Julian, I am with child. For a moment, Julian simply stared at her. Then his face broke into the most radiant smile she had ever seen. "Truly, you are certain. I saw the physician this morning. He confirmed it. We are going to have a baby." Julian stood and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the desk and spinning her in a circle. "This is the most wonderful news. Rosalind, you have made me the happiest man alive." He set her down gently and immediately dropped to his knees, pressing his hands to her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I am your father, and I cannot wait to meet you. You are already so loved." Rosalind felt tears streaming down her face as she looked down at her husband kneeling before her. "You are truly happy. I worried you might think it too soon." Julian stood and cupped her face in his hands. "How could I be anything but overjoyed? We are creating a new life together, a child who will grow up knowing only love and safety. This is everything I could have wanted." That night they made love with exquisite tenderness, Julian treating Rosalind as though she were made of spun glass. His hands roamed over her body with reverence, pausing frequently to caress her belly where their child grew. "You are so beautiful," he murmured, kissing his way down her body. "So perfect. I love you more than I can express." Rosalind arched beneath his touch, pleasure building as Julian used his mouth and hands to bring her to the edge of release. "Julian, please," she gasped. "I need you." He moved over her carefully, entering her slowly, mindful of her condition. The sensation of being joined with him never failed to overwhelm Rosalind. The physical intimacy, a perfect expression of their emotional bond. They moved together in perfect synchronization, building toward climax with practiced ease. When Rosalind came, it was with Julian's name on her lips and his eyes locked on hers. He followed moments later, groaning his pleasure as he spilled inside her. They collapsed together, both breathing hard, both smiling. "I love you," Rosalind whispered. "Thank you for giving me this life, this happiness. You gave it to yourself," Julian replied, kissing her forehead. "I just provided a safe place for you to bloom." The months of Rosalind's pregnancy were marked by joy and anticipation. Julian doted on her constantly, ensuring she had everything she needed and wanted. He read books about childbirth and infant care, determined to be an involved father. Rosalind continued her charity work as long as she was able, then shifted to organizing efforts from home when her condition made travel difficult. They spent long evenings planning for their child's future, decorating the nursery, choosing names. They talked about the kind of parents they wanted to be, both determined to create a childhood filled with love and security. "Our child will never know fear," Julian said one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on Rosalind's swollen belly. "Never experienced the kind of pain you endured. I promise you that." "I know," Rosalind said, covering his hand with hers. "Our baby is already the luckiest child in the world to have you as a father." On a warm spring morning, after hours of labor, Rosalind gave birth to a healthy daughter. The moment the midwife placed the tiny, squalling infant in her arms, Rosalind fell completely in love. The baby had wisps of auburn hair and Julian's striking blue-gray eyes. "She's perfect," Julian breathed, sitting on the bed beside Rosalind and gazing at their daughter with wonder. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name her?" Rosalind asked. They had discussed many options, but in that moment, only one name felt right. "Felicity," Rosalind said. "It means happiness. She represents every bit of joy in our lives." "Felicity," Julian repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect. She's perfect. You are perfect." He leaned in to kiss Rosalind softly. "Thank you for this gift. For our daughter. For our life together. For everything." The early days with Felicity were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Julian proved to be a devoted father, taking turns with nighttime feedings and diaper changes, despite having servants who could handle such tasks. He wanted to be involved in every aspect of his daughter's care. Rosalind watched him one night as he walked the nursery with Felicity against his shoulder, singing softly to soothe her fussing. Her heart swelled with love for this man who had saved her in so many ways. As months turned into years, their family grew. 2 more children followed Felicity, a son they named Thomas and another daughter named Violet. The house was filled with laughter and noise, and the beautiful chaos of childhood. Rosalind threw herself into motherhood while continuing her charity work. She became known as an advocate for abused women and children, using her position and resources to make real change. Gordon Whitmore had died of apoplexy 3 years after Felicity's birth, and Rosalind felt nothing at the news. He was simply irrelevant to her life now. Julian's shipping business flourished, partly due to his acumen, but also because of his fair treatment of employees and honest dealings. He and Rosalind became known as a devoted couple, their obvious affection for each other the subject of envious gossip among their peers. The passion between them never dimmed. They still made love frequently, stealing moments alone whenever they could. Their physical relationship had evolved over the years, becoming richer and more varied. They knew exactly how to please each other, where to touch, what to say, how to build and prolong pleasure, until they both shattered one evening. As they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary, Julian led Rosalind to their bedroom after the children were asleep. He had arranged candles throughout the room and had wine and chocolate waiting. 10 years, he said, pulling her into his arms. 10 years of loving you, and I fall deeper every single day. I never imagined I could be this happy, Rosalind admitted. That frightened girl on our wedding night could never have dreamed of this life. She was brave enough to trust me, Julian said, beginning to undress her slowly. Brave enough to let me see her scars and her pain. Without that courage, we would not be here now. He made love to her that night with the same tender passion he had shown on their wedding night, but with the added intimacy of 10 years of knowing each other completely. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered word was perfectly calibrated to bring maximum pleasure. Rosalind came apart in his arms multiple times before Julian finally allowed himself release. They lay together afterward, tangled in sheets, and each other, both satisfied and content. Do you remember what you said on our wedding night? Rosalind asked, about having no rights over my body. Of course I remember, you were right, she said softly, and you have honored that promise every single day. You have never taken, only asked, never demanded, only offered. You have made me feel safe and cherished and desired. You have healed wounds I thought would never close. Julian tightened his arms around her. You healed yourself, Rosalind. I just loved you while you did it. We healed each other, Rosalind corrected. You were broken in your own way, feeling like a disappointment to your family, never quite good enough. But I see you, Julian. I see your strength and kindness and integrity. You are the best man I have ever known. They made love again, slower this time, savoring every sensation. When they finally fell asleep in the early hours of the morning, they were wrapped around each other, hearts beating in synchronization. Years continued to pass. Felicity grew into a confident young woman who knew her own mind and spoke it freely. Thomas became a thoughtful boy with his father's analytical mind and his mother's compassionate heart. Violet was fearless and joyful, bringing light wherever she went. Rosalind watched her children grow with amazement and gratitude. None of them would ever know the kind of fear she had lived with. None of them would carry scars from cruelty disguised as discipline. They were being raised with love, respect, and the knowledge that they were valued for exactly who they were. On their 20th anniversary, Julian surprised Rosalind with a trip to the seaside, just the two of them. They left the children with trusted servants and spent a week rediscovering each other away from the demands of daily life. They walked on the beach, talked 4 hours about everything and nothing, and made love with the freedom of privacy and uninterrupted time. Julian still looked at Rosalind with the same desire and devotion he had shown on their wedding night, and she still responded to his touch with the same intensity. I would marry you again, Rosalind said one evening as they watched the sunset from their room. Every single time, in every possible life, I would choose you, and I would choose you, Julian replied, pulling her close. The frightened girl, the confident woman, every version of you in between. You are the love of my life, Rosalind, my partner, my passion, my everything. They made love as the sun set, their bodies moving together with practiced ease, pleasure building and cresting in perfect waves. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Rosalind reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From an arranged marriage, neither wanted, to a love story that had exceeded all expectations. From pain and fear to healing and joy. From two broken people to a partnership that had created beauty and life and hope. The scars still marked Rosalind's skin, faint white lines that would never fully fade. But they no longer defined her. Instead, they were simply part of her story, proof that she had survived and thrived despite everything meant to break her. As she drifted off to sleep in Julian's arms, Rosalind thought about that terrified girl standing in her nightgown on her wedding night, certain that her life was over. If she could speak to that girl now, she would tell her to have courage, that the man approaching was not a threat but a salvation, that pain could be transformed into power, fear into strength, and scars into stories of survival. She would tell her that true love existed, the kind that saw every flaw and loved more deeply because of them, the kind that asked instead of demanded, that gave instead of took, that healed instead of hurt. She would tell her that happiness was possible, even for someone who had known such darkness, that joy could be built on the ruins of pain, that life could be beautiful and full and worth living. But mostly, she would tell her to trust, to take that first leap of faith with Julian, to let him see her scars, to believe that kindness and respect were real and not just tricks, because that trust, that vulnerability, had opened the door to everything that followed. 20 years of marriage, 3 beautiful children, a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection, a passion that had never dimmed, a love that had only grown stronger with time. All of it had started with one terrified girl finding the courage to say yes to a kiss from a man who promised to never hurt her. And he had kept that promise. Every single day for 20 years, Julian had kept that promise. He had loved her with patience and passion, had supported her dreams, had helped her heal, had given her a life beyond her wildest imagi and angs. As sleep claimed her, Rosalind's last conscious thought was gratitude. Gratitude for the arranged marriage that had become her greatest blessing. Gratitude for the husband who had seen past her scars to the strength beneath. Gratitude for the love that had transformed everything. And gratitude for that first pure kiss on their wedding night. The one that had started it all. The kiss that had promised tenderness and delivered so much more. The kiss that had been the beginning of forever. In Julian's arms, safe and loved and cherished, Rosalind smiled in her sleep. She had found her happily ever after, not in spite of her painful past, but because she had been brave enough to trust that something better was possible. This story was proof that love could conquer pain, that kindness could heal wounds, that two people could find each other in the darkness and create light together. It was a story of survival and strength, of passion and partnership, of scars transformed into symbols of triumph rather than shame. It was their story, and it was beautiful.